We'll get started in a few minutes as usual. Just doing my test to make sure everything's working. Alright. One more minute and I'm gonna get sketching. Hope everybody is good tonight. It's kind of cold here, so it's kind of nice. Cintiq acts like a nice little fireplace. Get rid of the waiting screen. Cool. Alright, so tonight I'm just gonna just do some free sketching. As I've done it a few times before. I did a little image gathering of some stuff that just looked fun, things that don't really go together. So like on the left I usually put the things that I kind of want to like have as like the family, a sort of like overall theme. Which in this case is like these like plump caterpillars, and I found this really cool little picture of a fly. But I love the way these caterpillars, like their feet are all kind of plump, and the way that they kind of like wrap up, they look like those water bears. These cool little faces. I don't know if everything we do tonight is going to be based on that. I also like the way that this fly had like the big eyes and like that big abdomen with the little legs and stuff. So there's that, and then there's some of the things that I found that were interesting and had nothing to do with that stuff whatsoever was, I don't know what these things were called, but there's like these beautiful big wild cats. Definitely have issues with them being in captivity, but they're gorgeous. There's these powdered wigs, which I thought were really cool. These old computers, which I don't, like they call them like terminals, not computers, which I thought was really funny. And then there was this chameleon, which I'm pretty sure someone went into the Photoshop and hit the hue set on it, but it was just a really nice shape, and I like that it's kind of like, I think it's a little bit of an adolescent chameleon, so it has kind of like fun proportions. So there's that. All right, Casper, Sleeping Dumplings, and Kristen, good to see you guys. So yeah, I'm just gonna sketch, and you guys feel free to hit me up with any questions. I'll try and talk as much as possible. I'm definitely gonna be doing a mech tonight of some kind at some point, which you guys, if you guys have been around these enough, you'll know I kind of go a little quiet while I'm working on the mechs, just because I'm concentrating. But don't let me do that. Just keep hitting me with things if you can. And that's it. So I think to kind of warm up, I'm gonna start with like a little organic character. I don't know, we'll see. And then we'll move on to something more mechanical. So, I promised myself, I've been kind of skipping a step, which is like the silhouette stage, just because I wanted to kind of like move a little faster, but I want to kind of get back to doing it, especially in front of everybody, because I feel like if you're just starting out trying to figure this stuff out, using the silhouettes as kind of like we did for that creature, the 4 creatures last week, is really helpful. So it's like a building block. I'm still going to do the loose sketch, but when I'm sketching for myself, sometimes I just skip the silhouette stage just because I'm having fun. But as far as like good practice, I think you always want to start with a silhouette. Make sure your silhouette's reading really well. So let's get back to the basics a little bit more. So I love these like plump legs that they got going on. And then I'm gonna do like I think a four-legged creature with like a cool little tail or something like that. So it's got like caterpillar-esque qualities to it, but not straight up. And then not sure if I'm gonna do two big eyes like on that fly, which is pretty cool. I like those. Or if I want to do something more internalized like that little tiny face. And then, yeah, that's kind of cute. So proportionally we'll do like a little tiny face tucked in there. I might change it, we'll see. And then as usual I want to put some sort of antenna thing sticking off of it. But let's see if I can do something other than just like my little, I always tend to do like these little pod things like that, which I really like to do. I think it's like a nice alien cute ear thing. But why don't we what would be cute? You got a big ball down here, you get the plumpness there, so then you need something kind of fine. I think maybe if it's like a wispy thing, but it still has like some plumpness at the bottom, so it still looks like it's like and we'll figure out like exactly what we're doing that as in a second, but I think it'd be kind of cool if they're like a little segmented, a little plump. Alright, so yeah. So there's a silhouette. So, just to kind of reiterate, like if I was designing for a film or a game or something like that, I would definitely take this silhouette and duplicate it a bunch of times and try different things on it. Because it's just a couple of us tonight. We're gonna just play with this one as is, just one time, and we'll move on to another one. Still staying really loose, but kind of looking back at like that nice plump, like they have these little suction cup things, which are really cool. I don't know if I've used those before, so I want to try those out. The key, I think, is going to be to try and make them look like they are a little bit compressed under their own weight, so that it feels squishy. Yeah, it's like Michelin Men dogs. I remember what those dogs are called, the really wrinkly ones. They're super cute. And then, yeah, I want to do like a magic kind of like glow tail. And then let's see if we can't make some sort of cute face in here. I like that it looks like a little bit like a mascot or like a kid wearing a snowsuit. then yeah, I think to get some contrast, I'm gonna make these a bit more segmented so that it doesn't feel like he's just soft all over. Put like little light bulbs at the end. And as a rule, like whenever I'm doing things like what I'm imagining, like these light bulbs are made out of, I try and let the motion of what I imagine got them there kind of dictate their shape, like the flow of them. They're not just like shaped like this, like it's like he whipped up his antenna that way. And I also kind of want to like emulate, so it has some movement in there. It also shows that there's like a pliability to it, and that's just like this subconscious thing of like when you're presenting different materials, that if you can kind of illustrate how they work a little bit in motion, then suddenly like the material sort of comes alive a little bit more, or so I've found. Hey Alex. Alright, so then I'm gonna do 2 goofy eyes in here. I've had some good luck with like these like crab style eyes. Let's try those first. Maybe we do like a, it's cute, but I'm trying to think what I want to do for the mouth that doesn't just feel like a tooth thing sticking out. Could do mandibles. Did mandibles on the lobster that I posted today. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that should be alright. I think that's kind of cute. But I think, so the proportions ended up kind of, I think even. So I'm going to accentuate the size of the eyes and then make the mandible much more kind of dainty and small. I think that just gives it a little bit better rhythm. And then just to kind of reinforce that, I'll make it look like that mandible is just the last thing on the crest of that flesh, so it's like hanging out. I can imagine it's like just the only thing poking out. And I don't know, maybe he's got kind of like cool glowy spot things going all the way down him. It's like a full electric bug thing. I gotta be careful there because I like the big kind of simple shape. I don't want to break it up too much, but I definitely want to feel like, see, like, there, that's better. Like the big main shape is maintained, but then it starts to cluster down the bottom here. Get a nice big fat roll going over this, so it feels like get some compression. Yeah, I'd have one of those running around my house. That'd be fun. As long as it didn't eat my cat. Alright, then... oh, no, I guess I'm going to leave those, but how am I going to do little ones down the side, and then get the big one at the back. Yeah, that should work. And I think I'm just going to make it kind of lumpy. So I'm just going to give myself some lumps to ink off of, even though I'm not going to be this delineated with it. worlds. Stay out here. It's almost like old school Looney Tunes eyes where they're like shoved together. You could almost do that with it, but we're not gonna. Not tonight. Yeah, it's cute. It's like a bunny. A weird caterpillar dog bunny thing. This is about the point where I start thinking about like the things it does and stuff, and the way it acts, things, and also like the other characters that would like be in its world. And as you kind of like spend time designing like one character, that's when a lot of the ideas for other characters start to come, which can be like a really fun exercise. Might be a fun stream some nights, just design a set of characters that all are intended to go together. Instead of just like free sketching the entire night. But that's what I'm kind of into tonight, so you guys just have to put up with me just sketching. Hey, Corey. Let's get down to these legs real quick, make sure we get the weight right. Yeah, I think doing like a little set would be fun, like a mini world type thing. There was like this everybody has their favorite parts of making games, and I always got excited about designing indigenous races that had nothing to do with the actual gameplay. So there was like the enemies, that was fun. There was like the bosses, but then there was always like, if you visited a planet, there was always like, who lives there? What's the planet like? Or there was like some archaic tribal race or whatever, a warring race. It was always fun to figure out like whose planet you were visiting. That's a fun challenge. caught up in the details a little bit, but this guy's got some fun little shapes that I want to play with. Let me get back to getting the main stuff down and we can go back and do the details. That's the nice thing about sketching for yourself is like you can break your best practices and no one's going to get mad at you. It may not yield the best results because best practices are there for a reason, but like I was saying before, like where I'm starting with the silhouettes tonight instead of just jumping right to sketch, that's best practices. That's just going to generate better designs, better rhythms. But sometimes it's no fun to follow the rules. Sometimes when you mess up, you come up with an idea. There's nothing more hilarious to me than when I come up with a really good idea because I couldn't figure out how to draw something, and so I was copping out, but then something came out of it. It's such a tough thing to admit, but it is what it is. And when I say like designing, like coming up with things, like it's not always like a character that's gonna like change your world or anything like that. Sometimes it's just like a shape logic that suddenly like it's like part of your repertoire, like adding something to it. That's like really important. Is like when you're just like, I really like drawing teeth that way, and then all of a sudden like now you have this kind of like new, not a trick, but like a new technique or a new kind of like go-to shape logic that you can call. The more and more of those you kind of build up, the more choices you have to kind of come up with characters. And there's this kind of like fun thing where as you're exploring and coming up with those ideas, like you start kind of like simplifying some of those things down, and all of a sudden like you create like a shape language so that you can do it faster, which is always kind of fascinating. I think that is what I consider like the beginning of like developing style. This guy's got a nice cute little butt. I think that worked out just right. Alright, starting to look pretty cute. She maybe. Tail in. Kind of looks like a raspberry. Finish up the antenna. We'll go back and do all little details and we'll try something else. So like, as like to kind of like illustrate my point, like the way that I I handle like bug legs and bones, like alien bones and stuff like that. There's like these little marks that I make that represent the joint shapes when I'm going at the ends here. And it all came from just like playing around and drawing skeletons, and I just kind of got used to drawing like knuckles and joints and stuff like that. And now I just use them all the time. That's just like my go-to shape now. Like I don't even really think about it. It's just like, oh, that's the end of a bone. That's just kind of like a mark that I make. There's a little thought, but it's just something. It's like now I don't have to figure it out each time. I'm figuring the thing out I want to be figuring out, not just like these little things that used to dog me. New things to get dogged by. Alright, so that's gray values when I'm inking. What do you mean by that? The gray values, like the shadows? These down here? Those are my I tend to really focus on how shapes fall over each other, so I like to add in almost like I'm spotting black shadows, but like I like to add the shadows in when I'm drawing now. That's just kind of a thing that I really enjoy, kind of like jumping in and figuring out right out the gate like how some of these forms overlap and where they're casting their shadows. Is that what you're getting at? Like, why am I dropping those in now? It's gotten me into some trouble, like when I start painting things, if the shadow's there and I decide I'm going to light it from a different angle, all of a sudden those shadows don't make any sense. So it definitely doesn't always have like a positive result. But, you know, it reminds me that, you know, like how much overlap things have. And those are good reminders for me. Alright, I'll do a few little details on this guy. Maybe, just because he's lit up, I think I'm going to spot him real quick, if you guys don't mind me not designing another character right away. I don't think I'll shade him. I think I'm just going to separate him a little bit. So I'm just going to do a quick flat pass, and then I'll just illuminate some of his lights, because I think it's important for who he ended up being. And again, the reason I'm hand flatting and not just like dropping in a fill tool, which Clip has some amazing fill tools, but I use this like really sloppy line in my brush that I really like to use. I use it really thin, and so sometimes it just causes, when I'm doing, it has a lot of bleed, and so sometimes the fills don't work as great on it, and I end up doing just as much cleanup as it would be to do it the first time. And as long as I'm flatting right after I drew the thing, I'm still a little familiar with the kind of like shapes, so I can move through it really quick. And I found that like if I go back to a drawing that I did a long time ago and try and flat it by hand, it moves a little slower, which is, I think that's kind of funny, just because I haven't been in the rhythm of the shapes as recently. So this one's still fresh. And I am being a smidge sloppy too, which is also helps with the speed. I haven't decided if I would want his eyes to be lit up or not. So let's start with his tail. Yeah, doing the shading thing, like I said, it can bite you back. You know, if you drop in a spotted shadow into your line work, one really good way around it is to just do all your shadows like that on a separate layer, so you still have the advantage of using them. But because I'm just sort of doing them as I'm inking, it's hard to move between different layers without kind of like losing rhythm. And then these little light bulb things. I know what I'm gonna do. Okay, so guys, bear with me for a second. I hope this will look cool. Never know. Let's see, so he would have kind of a slightly brighter belly. Little white feet, little light feet. And then just we'll just carry a couple of little freckles out of that. Kind of make them look even cuter. Freckles do a lot of lifting for the cute thing. A little mascara to kind of frame the eyes. Alright, so what I'm going to try, and this may just completely backfire, I'll try going real dark with the eyes at first. It's funny when I'm flatting this stuff and I use tones that are too close together, and then I do hue shifts or value shifts, it immediately reveals how sloppy you are, so I gotta go back and tweak it real quick. Alright. And then, okay, so I'm gonna lock that transparency and we're gonna paint inside of it, so some like internal glows. This tail and mask it off just for the sake that I know I'm going to mess it up. Where hands are really hard to draw. They're always hard to draw. Is that what you asked? If they were ever hard to draw? They're a pain. They never ever give you. Sometimes, you know what I did to kind of get past it? I used to do drawings. I would start with the hand. That's how I used to trick people into thinking that I just knew how to draw hands. Draw the hand first. If you get a good hand, draw an entire drawing, because everything else is easier after that. entire drawing after that based on just the good hand that you drew. If it's a bad hand, you just start over and do another one. Alright, so then he's gonna need some, so then the light would catch like the rims of some of these lenses. And that just kind of gives it a like a thickness to it, like a piece, like they're made of glass type of thing. Oh, I didn't do these up here. And then a couple highlights, real strong, kind of bright. I could definitely like work like reflections and stuff into this, but I think just for the sake of having fun, I'm just gonna stop that part. Normally I'd be a lot more careful to put things like my highlights on separate layers and stuff so I didn't get bugged. You know, if you have to edit something and the highlight has to go, it's nice to have it on a separate layer, but tonight I'm just going for it. And then, let's see. So we're going to calm that down just a little bit so that the eyes pop. And then we'll just throw a little glow over top of everything. I don't know, kind of cute. A few little details. Sometimes once you flat something, like when you have it just line work, it always feels a lot more detailed, and then you flat it, and that sort of simplifies the details for it. So I always find at this point I'm heading back into the drawing. Probably with the wrong size brush apparently. Just kind of reinforcing things and I don't know, I'm sure that makes sense. Just critter. Love drawing critters. Any advice on how to manage a bunch of commissions? That's not it's a good problem to have, I guess. Alright, so let's move this guy out of the way. How to manage a bunch of commissions. In the past, I mean, first come, first serves type thing is always the thing. I think what I'm going to say isn't going to like blow your mind by any means, but let's do something mechanical. So I'm going to just name this folder mech. Okay. Yeah, first come, first serve. Try to, like, I think there's one thing that I can say is like people who, if you meet your quoted deadline, a lot of times people will come back and have more, because that timeliness, and that goes for freelance work as well, anything that you're doing, that timeliness goes a long way to getting you repeat business. So I would definitely not overpromise. I don't know how to answer this question because everybody works so differently. But for me, like commissions, I don't do them anymore for the money. I do them because I enjoy them, and I have a rule where if I'm going to do a commission, it's not like someone else's character. So I'm doing it really just for myself, for fun, to explore. So I'm just in a really different spot. But when it came to when it was much more, I'm not really digging that thing. I don't know what that was. I definitely want to do a Mac. Let's see, what am I going to do? Let's see if I can pull like some sort of like tank thing off or something. Yeah, okay. Do something like that. See if that works. Oh, you know what? That's a good reason. That's a good use for that powdered wig and the TV. So let's get the TV, the monitor. Cool. Yeah, that's gonna work cool. Definitely get some perspective going on that thing. Well, faster than I used to be. Just time. Okay, so back to your question, managing commissions. It's not a true silhouette, but you guys get the drift. Yeah, you gotta stay on top of them because it's your reputation. So you have to deliver them on time. And I've had my share of times where I've had a hard time meeting the deadline. But that is like what people will expect. And if you're really late, I know I've waited years for commissions before, and I'm fine with doing it. But it does like mean I'm never going to ask that person for a commission again, versus other people who came through on time. I've commissioned multiple things from. I love getting artwork from people. I haven't done like a tank tread in a while. It should be fun. I don't know. How about this concept? Cool. What are you having trouble with as far as managing it? Just too much? Like you just took on too much? Like, because I think that's where I'm having all the trouble answering is like, what's the issue? You just, like, are you having trouble drawing the thing that you promised you're going to draw? Do you take on too much? What's the deal with the concept? Cool. So this will be a good candidate for doing some like repetition stuff, which is always fun to do in mechs. Something. Not sure what, but something. Alright, so let's get some sort of articulated spine thing going on. Does he need arms? Is he just a gunship? Something through here. What does he got? He needs... What does he need? Just do like random tech back there. I think he needs arms. I don't normally like vehicles with arms, but I think I'll try and pull it off. So... let's give him like little skinny arms. What's he doing? Is he complaining? Let's have him like explaining something to someone, like, what the frick? What's going on with you these days? Concept Cole? Your commission list? Alright, let's see if we can make that into something. After my brief tea break. Oh, okay, so I feel like a lot of people ask me for character commissions, and it's fun, but should take multiple at a time, or just finish one and take another one. Oh, okay. No, I don't think there's any problem with taking multiples, as long as you're making, you know, I for lack of a better way of saying it is, you know, you got to hustle. So or strike when the iron's hot, or whatever old people say. You know, take what you can get, but be really honest with the people who are commissioning you, your clients, that you know you have a list, and as soon as you're done with the previous one, that's when you're going to get to you. And that's really common. That's not like uncommon. Like, you know, when you go to a con and you're working with an artist on a commission piece, if 6 people are before you, 6 people are before you. That reminds me, I gotta save. I guess, you know, you could spend more money and push yourself to the front of the line, but that's always fine if that's a thing. But my point is, like, just be honest with them that your commission list is an organic, living, breathing thing, and that as you finish one, you'll get to theirs. And if you have someone who's leaning on you to go ahead of the line, that's just a bad, that you don't want to work with that person anyway. I know that's a little easier to just say than do. But sorry, like I said, I go a little bit quiet when I'm working on the mech stuff because I'm busy trying to get my lines dialed properly. Perspective is a hilarious thing. It's just as bad as hands. Is your line width set to pen pressure? Yes. Or are you just drawing very lightly with a... No, everything's set to pen pressure. Right now my brush is set to a 70. It's those numbers are based on the resolution of your screen. So if you're, just because you like drawing with a 70, you may open up a file that's much more higher res, and all of a sudden the 70 is going to be too small. So those are pixel based, and they're not proportional. So you just have to go with what works. But like I don't know, I guess you guys can't see. My left hand is on a keyboard the entire time, and I'm scaling up and down brushes, hitting my marking menus. So I'm never using the same size brush all the time. It definitely varies. And with the mech stuff in particular, there's for me, there's hand fatigue. So I may start off with a brush that has a lot of range, or a size brush that has a lot more range of pressure, thick to thin, and I can control the line thickness very well because I'm just kind of fresh. And I find that like when I get tired, leaning into the brush to get a thicker line, or trying to not press too hard because I'm kind of heavy-handed, becomes kind of laborious. And so then I find myself scaling the brush manually more often after I'm starting to get a little bit tired. So it's kind of a good indicator to take a break, honestly, but I don't always have the option of taking a break, so you have to just kind of go with what you can do. Oh, good. I'm glad you're getting something out of these. I don't ever want to tout my techniques as gospel by any means. They're just what I use, and I think I've said it before in some of the other streams, but a lot of times the way I do things is definitely the wrong way to do them, but it's just what makes me comfortable, and I just kind of fight through things. Sometimes I like that things are harder to do. You know, like there's an example I can give you where it's just, you know, like when I do a 3D model, I wish I could still lay out UVs by hand, even though there's just so many nice packers now that do all the work for you. I loved laying out UVs, and I preferred the way my UVs got laid out. So even after I use unwrap tools and 3D models, I'll still go through and hand adjust them so that sometimes it's just so they look better, so my UV layout just looks nicer, even though it might not always be more efficient. I was doing it for so long, for so many years, that there's sort of like this art to it, this aesthetic to it that I really like. So, all that is to say, even though I'm doing it, try things out. Make sure I'm not just doing it the hard way and making your life more difficult. So I'm going to get the guns going first. So I'm going to do the guns on a separate layer. Because they're so close to parallel, I can do one and I'm just going to duplicate it. So see if I can make this work. So when I'm duplicating things, one thing I like to try and remind myself is not to finish the element as much as I can, meaning like really put signature marks in it. I only do the structure as much as possible, and then the reason I think that that's beneficial is because then once you've duplicated it, you can go back to each one and kind of add those elements in, and I think it just kind of starts to bring a little bit more uniqueness to each one, if that's important to you. So this is more like laying it out type of thing. No, I have definitely not mastered. I use a lot of mediums. I've just been doing this a long time. I made games a long time. Which game studios, if you guys aren't in games yet, game studios are great. See, like I just started to add details that I shouldn't have added. Okay. They're great because a lot of times, especially with smaller studios, they will allow you to learn a lot of different techniques and tool sets that if you were at a bigger studio, you might have less of an opportunity to learn those things, because everything is so specialized, and there are different departments, and they just can't afford to have everybody learning all the time. So this sort of small studio environment that I grew up doing this stuff in, has been really beneficial. Was really beneficial because they would say, like, we need modeling, we need concept art, we need video editing, we need whatever, and you would have the opportunity to try those things out. Pretty sure I'm going to be erasing a lot of this stuff, but I'm going to leave as much as possible for now. Alright, now I get back to hand drawing. So yeah, now that I've got all those repetitive parts kind of laid out, I can start to add a little bit more signature stuff going on. Actually, I know I wanted to make on this overhang, I want to do like a flap. This will be fun to try and get right on the other side. I think that's cool. Not really sure why it's there, but just has like a nice kind of like a kind of covers over that weapon set a little bit, which is nice. Alright, so then it'd be cool if there's like some sort of connector for these two. Alright. That's actually another topic that I want to get into. I think I mentioned it briefly before, but I wasn't as specific as I meant. I want to get into using 3D as a sort of like a base for concept work. It's one of those things where it can feel sacrilegious to oftentimes to kind of use that, to use a 3D element, bring a 3D element in to like help you with perspective, or don't lay something out or whatever. But I can honestly tell you that stuff is really, really helpful, and it goes a long way, especially in the professional world, like where people aren't trying to impress anybody, they're trying to do a good job. So it's nice to know your perspective and things like that, but I think I want to get into like showing different ways to, you know, like how you can model primitives out just to kind of get compositions, or if you have a character that you're going to have to draw in multiple views, sometimes it makes sense to to have like a base mesh of them so that the thing stays on proportion really nicely. And kind of start breaking down that wall that people put up when they think that, you know, you have to be able to draw everything perfectly. If that's your goal, that's great. That's a personal goal, but when it comes to professional work, like that's not a thing. I love powdered wig. I have a character from a million years ago called, I called it the Victorian at the time. And I had no idea that there was already a character named the Victorian. But I'm really looking forward to getting back to that. It's a bit more of a serious story. So it's not really my cup of tea all the time. Sometimes I like just more whimsical stuff. But he had a lot of powders wigs in that story. They're kind of, those and the collars, those like big, like Rembrandt style collars are so fascinating. I have to do something with one of those collars and a character, even if not tonight, sometime. Alright, let's figure out what's going on at the bottom of this one. I am going to stay mute on that because I have some things in the works, but they're not it. If I start talking about them, they won't make any sense. But definitely going to be working on some comic stuff this year. I can say that. Comics are hilarious to me because I learned the hard way. I really thought that was one of the venues that I was going to go into and do more often. They take so long. And when I walk into a comic store, I actually get a little bit of anxiety because I realize just like how much time went into everything that's around me. It gets me kind of gives me chills a little bit. I don't know. So maybe it's like, I think my go-to would be to do like hoses. I always like to attach things back in with hoses, but I think tonight I'll just do like an exhaust port setup. Let's see, I'll just make one and I'll duplicate it. Alright, that's starting to work. can see this is what I was talking about, where I like to duplicate things. I think that's a really smart way to work, but I think leaving a little bit unfinished so that you go back and kind of tweak things to kind of give each one a little bit of like a handmade touch. It goes a long way to kind of making things feel special and kind of like handmade. Alright, I think before it gets too late, I'm going to do the hands. His hands are hard, but I'm going to keep them relatively simple. It was Glenn Keane said if you're gonna get anything right, get the hands and the eyes right on a character, and that just like adds to the pressure, because then you're just like, oh god, those are the two hardest things to draw. I don't know, maybe he was messing with people just because he knew that was the case. Yeah, I agree. I definitely buy comics for the art now. Almost more than I buy them for the stories. And so there's this like kind of like double reason why I buy any comic now. It's just to be able to enjoy it. Because I don't reread comics that much. I never have. After I read them, that tends to be it. Just one of the comics I did was like the fastest read ever. You know, you could probably read it in an hour or something like that. And it was a 80-page comic book, and I spent like 2.5, 3 years on it. Just breezing through it. I say this every time, but if you guys have stuff that you're working on that's interesting, that's going on, you want to share with everybody who's paying attention, you drop it in the chat. Or if you haven't been here before and have never heard me say that before, feel free to just drop whatever is going on in your creative worlds into the chat, and that way people can find it. If you want to. It's always nice to get the hands done. starting to cook in here, so I'm gonna take a second and take this hood off for a second. I'll get it back, so hang on. Alright, that's better. Heat in my house is funny. It'll be freezing cold out, be freezing all day. The heat will come on just once in a while and kind of like just knock it off, but then all of a sudden in the middle of the night it just turns into a sauna. Then you have to like manually turn that down. Sure, it's user error. Sorry, I know whenever I say I'm going to do a mech, it's like the thing that I work on for like most of the night, but they just take more time. I've had to be more careful about even projects that I take on when they're coming at me with the original pitch and they're not sure if a character is organic or mechanical. Makes a big difference in your schedule. We're not going to block that in too tight until we get the center of this guy down. So a lot of the stuff's going to be in shadow, so I don't have to go nuts on it. Oh, I just did that. That's so funny. I knew I was going to do that. I left the drawing of the back of that one gun in and then drew as if I was going behind it. Because I suck. No, nobody sucks. Positive. Alright, so I'm just kind of like working in some functionality, some like artificial functionality in this thing. What I really care about when I do these is can I imagine it generally moving, and when I start adding details like pistons and joints and things like that, I don't always care if they work. A lot of times when I design characters, there's a lot of mechanical bits and pieces that don't actually ever get rigged to move. They just look like they would move, and that is all that needs to be done with that. So it's important to just indicate, you know, like how the locomotion would work on something, but not necessarily always have to figure it out. A lot of people have been asking, like whenever I post a mech thing, like how do you, like what's your best thing that you look at for mechanical reference and to, you know, like to kind of get inspiration as to like how things work. And I like motorcycles. More importantly, I like hand-built motorcycles, and I like Japanese motorcycles. I think that they have a lot of really reminiscent robot-like forms. So if you guys are looking for something like yet another one of your Pinterest pages, I have entire directories just devoted to like motorcycles. And the other thing I really like is landing gear on jets, because it's really functional and overall it's pretty simple, but it has some really interesting kind of like connections. So I get a lot of I always lean on that. I always will go to whatever search site I'm on, and I always start with landing gear. And a lot of times at this point I've seen pretty much most of the photos that are out there to reference, so I can just go to the directories that I already have. But landing gear on like especially like 70s era fighter planes and 747s, it's got some really, really cool functionality. Good night, Kristen. Trying to think what else I use pretty regularly. There are these, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're like these little GIFs of like gear mechanisms and how they work, and they're always like, the gears are always colored. They look like almost like Legos, but they're done in like some like AutoCAD program or something like that. And they just like show how different like gear ratios work. And right now, for whatever, there's like this huge surge of like engineers making these things. They can find them on Pinterest. Just like type in like gear ratios, and I'm sure they'll start popping up. But what's cool about them is like it's like Grease 2.0, where like all these like really smart engineers are trying to figure out new and interesting ways to use like gear ratios. And you know, like there'll be like 3 weird shaped gears all moving around doing something. And I don't know, I get a lot of ideas from some of the mechanisms that these folks are coming up with that are a lot smarter than I'm ever going to be. So I appreciate them doing the heavy lifting. What else do I look at for mechs? Obviously, like lots of military vehicles and construction vehicles. Love me some construction vehicles. Caterpillar. Directories just purely of like older machinery, like old 20s bucket loaders and things like that. You have some really good stuff. And I'm not really a reference guy. Like I don't stare at reference while I'm drawing things. But I do like, but I'll spend like entire days just looking around at stuff, just kind of like getting ideas. And a lot of times what I come away with is something that wouldn't actually work, but it kind of like gives like the implication that it would work. It's like a nod to the real thing. These guns dialed in. And then there's all kinds of like beautiful like old turn of the century like just deco design and stuff like that, where they just people who are building machinery just like also wanted it to look really cool. So just doing like collections of that stuff is always really great. So, you know, like I have my issues with like some of the new design style for like robots, like the Transformers stuff from Michael Bay and stuff like that, which like I don't not like it, but I wouldn't design that. And I think as I've sort of started to think about it more and more, it's because when I was growing up, technology was like you could it was all tactile and you could imagine how it worked, even though like you look at like Space Odyssey and like the Aliens movies, Star Wars, even to some degree. You can imagine the kind of like the hand building that stuff. I just love that. So that's kind of like the kinds of reference I'm looking for, is like hand built, handmade stuff, something that looks like people were in a garage somewhere tinkering away trying to figure that stuff out. And I think the Michael Bay stuff is impressive, but it lacks that, like, I know that they're supposed to be aliens, but I think the nostalgia overrides that for me. Like, I really like imagining that it could actually transform or something. Wires hanging out of things. That goes a long way for me. I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority with that stuff, but I think it definitely is the cool. Alright, so let's see, that would cast a shadow. Where's all that? Start to come together. Once we get the back of this head and the waist done, tread should hopefully go pretty quick. We can do another design. I think we might be able to do, what's that, 12:30? Definitely do 3 designs tonight. We might be able to get down to 4. We will see. So like when I'm doing like these internal details of tech, at some point, sometimes it makes sense to just block in a shape and then go back on top of that shape and just start detailing things. So because it's really just the implication that there's something going on in there. You don't have to get ultra specific. You just have to make sure that the rhythms are there, and repetition goes a long way with designing, like mechanical bits. So just having like nice negative shapes painted in there, shadow shapes, goes a long way. Alright, so now we can get back to the waist. Hey Enzo, it's a big entrance. I like that caps lock was on, because like whatever you're doing before this was like yelling at some like idiot in a chat room or something like that. You come here, calm down, start yelling at us. Get a little, so like in here I'm just gonna do that same thing where I'm just gonna like fill all this in, and then we'll just like reverse things back out. Do the prop up piston, and then inside of that we can just imagine that there's like tech that sort of like represents a brain. So I always build things real complicated inside brain cavities of robots. But it's not specific, it's just like nice little interior shapes. Alright, then we gotta get, I would have forgotten this, the other side. And fortunately, I got away with it. You don't have to draw the flap on the other side, so good for me. That's good design right there. Always looking out for number one. Anything else? We got the antenna up here. And now let's wrap this up. So maybe it makes sense to do the treads, and then we can tie in the waist. Yeah, I guess do that. Okay, so let's do a tread. I'm gonna do that on a separate layer. I don't know if I've ever gotten the axis on the initial layout of these things the first try. Someday. And with this concentric ring tool, it's really just like a building process of going up and down the axes, trying to figure out like what works. This is where looking at construction vehicles really comes in handy. Obviously tanks too, but there's like this building technique to like construction vehicles where they just like overbuild everything because they can't afford to have this stuff breaking down on site. And that overbuild quality looks so cool to me. So again, I'm just gonna generally lay things out the way I think that they're gonna be. And then I will come back after I've duplicated it and sort of add some details. Okay. not sure I'm going to leave this one, but we'll see. Alright, go back. And this is going to be built off the same technology as far as like, so like you know, like when you're doing like wheels on tanks, you want to keep the build technology similar. And I don't really like scaling things down too much, because then I feel like, you know, like things will get out of scale, like the rivets and stuff like that will be all crazy. So like, you know, this one's gonna have like less rivets but the same size, and not missing some of the interior details, but I do think that this one can be scaled down to be kind of like the rear wheel. Because it's not so much that it matters. Alright, so now start merging these together and start making them look a little bit more unique. So I usually, what I'll do is with the treads is you know, like you want them to look like they're blocky. So they're kind of like having trouble getting around that wheel, as far as like, I'm going to turn that second wheel off if I can find it. I didn't label them, so I'm just going to turn off random things for a second. There we go. So they're not like soft treads like rubber or something like that. So they're, for lack of a better way of saying it, they're struggling to get over those wheels. Give them some thickness. And I'm just kind of drawing in. I'm being a little sloppy right now. I'm going to go back in and tighten these up a little bit in a second. And then the old World War II tanks, and I'm sure the new tanks have it as well. I don't really pay attention to tanks much anymore, but they, you know, I used to love the way that they kind of like sagged in between the wheels. So rather than just like doing straight lines in between, it's nice to like swoop them. And then on the bottom, it can be more straight, but even then, like in between the wheels, just to show a little compression, can have them rise up and then kind of like get flexed down underneath the wheel a little bit. So now I have a general idea of the tread pattern. Then I can just start making that look a little bit more interesting. This is like Clip has these really beautiful perspective tools where I could definitely be using those right now to lay these out. But I do also like, especially on tank treads, I like them looking a little tattered and beat up. So like my inability to get them perfectly in perspective and straight lines and things like that. Sometimes it lends itself to like a more fun shape. We'll see how much of this we can rob to do the other side. I don't remember who was asking me before. Maybe it was like why I use the shadow shapes. Like it also, when I start dropping in my shadows early, it's a bad habit and there's just no getting around it. But I really get a lot out of, like with mechs and things like that. It's really easy to get lost, and having shadows, I don't know, it's such an interesting trick of the brain that tells you how things work, that having those shadows in there, I don't get lost as much in some of the more complicated details. So that's why you'll see me keep doing that, where it seems like a good idea. It's not a good idea, but it's at the same time, it is a good idea in the sense that it's keeping me from getting completely lost in some of this more detailed tech. So like I know that this is deeper than that. It just kind of cleans things up for me, keeps me on par. And if I was doing it for a client, if this was definitely for a client piece, I would keep my shadows on a separate layer. I would not do that because I would need to have that flexibility of being able to make changes, and it's not an easy change to make when you've started drawing your actual shadow shapes in. It kind of brings things together really quick and reminds you of like where details are missing. And then the old tanks had just literally hinges. So I think I'm just gonna erase out little bright places for the hinges, and I'm just gonna keep a nice simple hinge. It's a nice negative shape, so I don't want to not include it. I could, the actual ones on Russian tanks and stuff like that, they have some really, really interesting bolt patterns and whatever they did to kind of reinforce them so that they were nice and strong. But for tonight, just because I want to move, I'm just gonna do loops. If I were painting this, I would just beat the crud out of these things. Now I'm starting to think even more that I'm going to duplicate this across to the other tread rather than start from scratch. So I'm going to keep it kind of light so I can add a little bit of individual mark making on it. Okay, so take through and kind of just tweak it and make it nicer. And as I kind of like do each of these individually, they'll just they just inevitably become a little bit more like as if they weren't created from the same thing. Which isn't a bad thing, it's just something I'm trying to avoid it being too overtly obvious. Some cracks in here. Damage, right? Treads have damage. And then the other one. So I'm definitely gonna tie the waist into this wheel here. That will look cool. And I might do something on this little wheel. Let's finish up this tread a little bit and then figure out how we're going to tie that in. It's probably going to be like a ball socket that goes into sort of like a fake hip. As you do. We can imagine like there's like a slight bulge. This gives us an opportunity to like get some of that some of this style of technology down into the tread area a little bit, so it's not just like too disparate bits of technology. To me, treads always walk this line of like, is that it's too archaic looking compared to like some of the sci-fi stuff that they stick them on. So like finding ways to like really get those technologies closer together kind of alleviate some of that disparity. Do like a flex joint down here. And then there'll be some like piston on the back of them that it's starting to work. So this whole area is going to end up in shadow from this wheel. kind of holding these things together. And I think the last thing I want to do on this guy, besides mess up this tread a little, is what I like about like tanks and stuff like that is they always have like the grab rails and stuff. So the way I like to do some of that stuff, especially when it's sort of an afterthought, is I'll just block it in on a separate layer. A nice solid brush, and it's really easy to do like pipe work. Just kind of lay it in. It's not really that much harder than like if you were doing some fancy calligraphy type thing. So it seems to me like you can just do a lot of this stuff relatively quickly, and then all you gotta do is trace it, make it look cool. So then on the layer above that, go back and just ink it in. And then load a selection off of the flats, hide that layer, and then delete it out of the layers below it. And just merge those all together. I think about does it for this guy. Little chips here and there that I think it needs. Just getting rid of my rulers real quick. Don't need them anymore. in. Just add little details here and there, just kind of spruce them up. What are we going to do next? I think we'll do another organic at this point. I think you guys going to want to watch me do a whole nother mech. I could spend all night just kind of going through and dolling up all the line work, just trying to make it look a little nicer. We don't get time for that. All right. Tink guy. There you go. Alright, let's do something else. I'm going to shrink down this critter a little bit. Move our tank out of the way. Where are we going to go? Put him down here for now. Start a new layer. Back to our silhouettes. Now let's see. Kind of already done like the cat thing. Kind of did the wig thing. The insect thing. We didn't really use these bug eyes. I wonder if there's something we could do that. I liked the way that they were separated in the middle. That's really cool. Flip that. Let's go the other way so everything's not facing the same direction. So let's see. We could do a straight up bug, but I think we'll have some more fun than that. It's definitely like, I don't know. It's kind of I'm answering a question that's just like, was it intuitive? Like, I like when I was talking about like I like things that look like they were handmade, hand touched. Like I also like the idea that like you can imagine how big something is, and so you, I think my intuition is always to find something on a character that gives you a relatively clear idea how big they are. So if it's like flathead screws, which I think you've probably seen in some of my work, or if it's like the handles or buttons. You know, a button wouldn't be this big, you know, it would be this big. So you could start to get an idea of like just like how big something is based on some of the more relatable objects, I guess. It's not a rule. It's just that's a personal thing, but it. I like that stuff. Alright, I'm starting to work out this sort of like bug guy. work. He's kind of boring to me already, but we'll see. Maybe something. Mess with his posture a little bit. That's the silhouette I'm going to stick with for now. Kind of just looks like a guy, like a principal scolding someone to me. There's this cool mouth that's on cicadas, and we get a lot of cicadas. I don't know if you guys get cicadas where you are, where they after they leave their grub state, they change into this like flying gigantic grasshopper-y looking bug, and they don't have mouths because they don't eat. They just have this like grill. It looks just like an old 50s car grill. It's crazy. But because they basically are gonna like just live to breed and then basically die, they don't have mouths, so they don't bite, nothing. They're just scary as anything because they're big. But I love their mouths. Get one flying into your head, and you know it. I was just doing that. I was going to mention I was roughing out things close up, and I try not to ever do my rough drawings close up, because you're not seeing the whole thing. There's no point. Like when you do the detailing pass, that's when you can zoom in and things like that, but you're just screwing yourself by moving in tight. I think I'm going to do wings on him. I'm going to do something else. Like some sort of spine. Not really feeling doing a wing. scoot some stuff around so we can have a bit more of his legs in there. I don't know. He's creepy. He's the right kind of creepy for me. I think I'm just gonna go for him and see what he turns into. Alright, so I'm gonna move some stuff around just because I want to leave it all up. Could definitely hide things, but let's arrange it so that we can see everything. This guy can live over here. Mr. Mech can live over here. And then this guy has a little bit more room to breathe. There. That feels right. Start with the hand for no reason. And definitely start on the wrong layer. That's always a good way to start. Again, I'm just using that like skeleton hand that I like to draw. Become kind of accustomed to. But it has such an insectoid quality as well to it that it works really well in my insectoid monsters. I definitely want this guy to feel crotchety, so I want to make sure his fingers feel pretty messed up. Arches are all reversing, and don't get too like there's a nice thing about like bug legs. You can see like even on this guy's bug legs, there's like they're really beautiful and elegant, but in order to make things look crotchety, you still have to find ways to take some of those rhythms and just like get them looking kind of messed up a little. You'll notice as I'm getting older, my hands are starting to get a little crooked looking, so that's good reference. A nice angry hand, right? I did a lot of these spines this morning when I was doing the lobster drawing that I posted. I had fun doing them, so here we go again. I'm not sure bugs really have these, but crabs and lobsters, they definitely have them. Right around their knuckles, they have all those nice, beautiful spines. Almost forgot the thumb. Can't forget the thumb. Someone will call you out. You guys ever been called out for putting the wrong hand on the wrong side of a complicated pose? You don't realize you put the wrong hand on? That was my MO for a while. One of my very first jobs when I started at Insomniac a million years ago. It was the first time I'd really worked on a production like that, and they were wrapping up the very first Ratchet game. And there was like all these odds and ends they needed help with, and so that was really what they were staffing up to do the next one, but the first one was going out the door in 2 months or something like that, so I got to touch it, but I didn't really do much on it. So I was doing some texture work and things like that, and then this task comes to me, and I thought it was so funny. They wanted to do some concept art for, like unlockables and things like that, and the concepts were all drawn with the fingers, with 3 fingers and a thumb, like you do in some cartooning. And I had to go through and add a pinky to each one based on Sony's feedback. Because it was an implication that it was if a character was, or if a person was missing their pinky, it was a sign that they had crossed the Yakuza. Which obviously in the world of Ratchet and Clank, I don't think we were implying that those characters had crossed the Yakuza. That was a pretty serious offense for a cartoon character. But nonetheless, it was serious enough where I had to go through and edit the concept art to all have an extra finger. I always remember that as one of my first tasks. Very funny to me. I don't know if you guys are laughing. I assume you're all rolling around on the ground right now. Let's start work. There's this point in almost every drawing, and I think my wife is a painter. She's an amazing painter. She does a lot of figurative portraiture, and she has her own body of work that is just figure based. And the paintings just take so much time and energy, and there's this middle point where they just aren't working. They're just falling apart, and it happens every single time. We joke about it now because it's been going on for so long, but at first it wasn't funny. But like basically brings you to tears. The painting that you've been working on for so long and planning and buying supplies for just looks like garbage. It's not that much different even now. You just do a piece and you're just like, you spend a bunch of time on it and you just cannot imagine how you're going to pull it off. But like clockwork, if you stick with it and you just kind of keep pushing, you end up with something. And usually with a little practice, you end up with something pretty good. May not be what you started out to make even, but that's okay. But I find it alarming, but also kind of comical, just like how emotional all this is. It's all self-inflicted. So like this is a new thing for me. Like I hadn't really done like really kind of like weird geometry based bug eyes before until I don't know when it was, a week ago or something like that. I decided I was gonna draw a crab and just had to look at what a crab's mouth looked like. I couldn't remember exactly how it worked. And I saw their eyes. And they weren't round, some of them are. But most of them weren't round. They were just kind of like these strange, kind of elongated shapes. Other people probably already knew it, but I didn't ever think to draw it that way. I was turned them into a round shape. So I tried it and I love it. So now that's one of my things. Maybe I'll get sick of it, but for now I love it. Said that just as I was trying to draw it. Almost has like those cat glasses. Look at this guy, his eyes. Look at that. Look at the flats on the inside of like where it meets his head. His head. That's awesome. Actually, I want to get a little bit more bulge in the middle there. That's cool. that cicada mouth in there. Just never ever know where you're gonna get your inspiration from. I never would have thought I was gonna get inspiration from a cicada, but North Carolina, there you go. It's got some weird stuff flying around in the woods. I'm gonna do these like almost like platelets for like an abdomen on a bug, but I want them to look a little bit like their rib cage. So I get that kind of like, I don't know if you've seen like old guys who have like really like hunched over and you can see their ribs when they're like swimming at the local pool or something like that. It's like a really interesting look. This guy's yelling at people to get off there in his lawn or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know this guy was gonna come out tonight, but I kind of like him. Just very kind of creepy, right? Definitely doesn't want anybody on his lawn. But he's a nice guy. Married 50 years. 3,476 grandchildren. Nice life on a pasture somewhere on some alien planet, raising his little spuds. Now, I'm not gonna go nuts on this hip. I do want it to look a little bug-like. So, as I'm winding down on this guy, which I think is going to be the last one for tonight, I was thinking, I don't remember who exactly brought it up, but I wanted to do sort of like stylized weapons, do another weapon pass maybe next week, or is there something else that would be more fun? Do more rendering, something. I like free sketching, and I appreciate you guys hanging out with me while I just sketch up ideas. But I know we can't do that every week. But if you guys have any thoughts, hit them in the chat so I know. I'll start planning some stuff out. Yeah, I agree. I think doing the characters together would be super fun. I think that'd just be a really fun exercise. I want to do that. One of the other ideas I had was I still want to do just taking a character through like silhouettes and just pretending, that we're facing up against an art director or something like that. That's another one. But yeah, just sort of building out a small scheme of characters. I mean, obviously, like these guys could all be in the same world if we wanted to, because they're all alien enough. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I think we come up with like a habitat or a situation, and just figure out who lives there and who's needs to be designed. World building. I don't know, unless there's something someone else wants to see that's like a bit more pressing, maybe we can just do that next week. That'd be kind of fun. This guy's hand in there. I'm gonna do something different with his hand than I sketched, I think. just about done for tonight. But if anybody has any questions, hit me with them. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this guy up. Start thinking about what kind of world we're going to build next week. You know what? I'm gonna do a little flatting on this guy just because he needs a little support, I think. So I'm gonna be here for a bit. Stay tuned. I think I want to use those spots from that cat on him. So skinny. Flatting skinny characters is hilarious because like you have to just do every little bit. It's like all the little nooks and crannies. I don't think it'll take that long, so just bear with me. I think it'll work good for this guy to have some flats on him. The silhouette is kind of what guides this design, and sort of the negative shapes in between everything. Try not to busy him up too much with spots, but I think he'll look cool with it. Hey man, have a great night. Thanks Casper, I really appreciate it. Speed up now. I think the main reason I wanted to do is because like his eyes, they need more than just like big empty spots, kind of like on the other guy. But I think the pattern be kind of neat. And then I think he will start to really come together, be a bit more unique. I mean, he's weird already, but which is a good thing. I like adding those layers. You can see like how like as I'm making like this arm come around, go around his little spinal column there, like all of a sudden like the negative shapes start really reading a lot better once the flat goes in, which is cool. Alright, so let's just go kind of nuts with him. I'm gonna kind of do this, not the same, but definitely want the lighter belly. And I think that little grill thing can be pretty cool if it's brighter. Maybe the tissue in between his joints is more dark this time. A little soft tissue. Actually, yeah, maybe the whole, oh, I forgot to layer link it. Okay. Maybe the whole thing behind his eyes is dark as well. That'll look cool. And his spines are dark. And then I'll deal with his eyes last, but I'll just block them in for now so that they're in front of everything. Introduce a little of that pattern of that, like that cat has. I'm gonna go kind of dark, and I'm just gonna back it off. So it's like this, it's like cool modulated shapes. I'm not copying it exactly, but I help kind of like reinforce the contours of the shell. Even helps to kind of create something interesting going on in the arms. And then just have his arm, whoa, kind of smudgy. His whole arm just get dark. It kind of grounds, just sort of starts to ground him a little, which looks cool. And then we'll throw some simple highlights on him. Always pick the wrong size brush for the first time. Yeah, you should look up cicada faces. They're scary but hilarious at the same time, because they kind of look dumb. gonna call this guy Plymouth. Everybody needs a name. Okay, and so then for the eyes, let's go with just gonna use all my tricks. Do the reflections. Okay. Yeah, that should do it. And then, yeah, what the heck? Do a little backlight, rim light on him. It's that weird plague where you just can't stop playing with things. But this guy's grown on me, so I can't just leave him hanging. Alright, that's gonna be it for that guy. Almost. Stopping. Okay, so what did we do? We did a bug, we did a tank, and we did a caterpillar, cat, pet thing. Let's see if we can't find it. So, I'm just gonna call him Bug. No, wait, what do we call him? What his name was? Plymouth. My pleasure, man. I'm glad I got to do it again tonight. Let's see what the best arrangement for these guys are. I have to play with it a little, I think. That's presentable. Cool. Alright guys, thank you very much for coming out, hanging out, asking questions, all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, next week we'll do something kind of interesting. We'll try coming up with like a little world. I don't know. And if it's too much for one stream, maybe we can just spend a couple of streams on it or something like that. We'll just come up with a little world of creatures. But until then, if nobody has any questions, I'll stick around for about 5 more minutes. And then I'm going to bail. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Do a couple little tweaks while I'm waiting. Alright, my pleasure. Alright, you guys have an amazing evening, and I will see you guys hopefully next weekend. Next week. Monday. Next Monday. It's always on Mondays. Alright. Take care, guys. Thanks again. Oh, and if you're still here, please, after I post up the video, if you don't mind coming back and doing the likes and thanks things, it helps me so much. You have no idea. It's dumb. I hate having to ask for that stuff, but it's huge, and I appreciate all the help I can get with this stuff. So, thanks. And I will talk to you guys on Monday.